Apollo 13 Commander Jim Lovell has more time in space, almost 24 days already, than any other man. And I asked him recently if he ever was scared.
Oh, well, I've had an engine flame out a few times in an aircraft and was kind of curious as to whether it was going to light up again, things of that nature. But they seem to work out.
Is there a specific instance in an airplane emergency when you can recall fear?
Well, I tell you, I remember this one time I'm in a Banshee at night in combat conditions, so there's no running lights on the carrier. It was the Shangri-La. We were in the Sea of Japan, and my radar had jammed, and my homing signal was gone because somebody in Japan was actually using the same frequency, and so it was leading me away from where I was supposed to be. And I'm looking down at a big black ocean, so I flip on my map light, and then suddenly, zap, everything shorts out right there in my cockpit. All my instruments are gone, my lights are gone, and I can't even tell now what my altitude is. I know I'm running out of fuel, so I'm thinking about ditching in the ocean, and I look down there, and then in the darkness, there's this green trail. It's like a long carpet that's just laid out right beneath me, and it was the algae, right? It was that phosphorescent stuff that gets churned up in the wake of a big ship, and it was just leading me home. And now, if my cockpit lights hadn't shorted out, there's no way I'd have ever been able to see that. So, you never know what events are going to transpire to get you home.
Hello, friends. So, during the summer, I've kind of put a challenge to myself to just do these short, or at least attempted to be short, devotionals from the Songs of Ascent, Psalm 120 through 134. And like I said last week, well, no one knows definitively. Both scholarship and tradition has it that these were songs sung by pilgrims as they headed up to Jerusalem to worship at the three high holy days of the Jewish calendar, specifically Passover, Pentecost, and Tabernacles. So last week I looked at Psalm 120. Today I'd like to read and reflect on Psalm 121. I lift up my eyes to the hills. Where does my help come from? My help comes from the Lord, the maker of heaven and earth. He will not let your foot slip. He who watches over you will not slumber. Indeed, he who watches over Israel will neither slumber nor sleep. The Lord watches over you. The Lord is your shade at your right hand. The sun will not harm you by day, nor the moon by night. The Lord will keep you from all harm. He will watch over your life. The Lord will watch over your coming and going, both now and forevermore. When I was a sophomore in high school, our youth group was called Somo Christo, the Body of Christ, from Lake Edge Lutheran in Madison. We took the retreat of a lifetime. We got on a train in Columbus, Wisconsin, and we took the Empire Builder 2.5 days to Wenatchee, Washington, detrained there, got on a Greyhound bus, and went up the highway that hugs the Columbia River all the way to the city of Chelan, Washington. And then we got on what looked like a big ferry. And Lake Chelan is this narrow, deep lake in Washington state. And we got on this boat, and I don't know if it was an hour, 2 hours, it felt like a long time going up Lake Chelan until we got to a dock. And we got off this dock and got onto a school bus that went up a mountain road with all kinds of switchbacks to the top to a place called Holden Village, and spent a week there in the Cascade Mountains. Now, I'm a kid born in Milwaukee, raised in the suburb of Whitefish Bay, outside of Milwaukee, and then we lived about a year in Glendale before we moved to Madison. I think the biggest hill I'd ever seen might have been Sugarbush Hill up in Crandon, near Crandon, Wisconsin, where my grandparents had a cabin. But otherwise, never seen a mountain except in pictures. But as you know, in so many things, until you're there, you don't realize how awesome mountains are. And I'm probably, as mountains go, they were probably low mountains. But I can remember being on that boat, going up Lake Chelan, and just being in awe of mountains. The mountains all around that lake. I had a little 110 Kodak Instamatic. Well, it wasn't Instamatic, but I was taking as many pictures as I could. And I look at those pictures today, and there's just no way it could capture the awe I was feeling in my heart. No doubt, Psalm 121 is a psalm you've heard before, especially the first verse. I lift up my eyes to the hills. Where does my help come from? I bet you've seen that on a picture, a photograph, a meme, and with a picture of some majestic mountain as a backdrop. But what I'm told by people who study these things, that in the days of the pilgrims that were going up to Jerusalem, one of the ongoing issues that every good king of Israel faced was that the high places became locations for pagan shrines of all kinds of indecency that we can imagine and probably can't imagine. Luring people up to worship on high. Unlike today, where we can worship pretty much anywhere we choose to, so long as we aren't interfering with others. For a good, God-loving Jewish person, the only place to worship was in Jerusalem at the temple. But along the way, there would be all these high places that, as far as the covenant was concerned, were not allowed. So this question that the psalmist says, where does my help come from? It's not directional, it's rhetorical. He says, my help comes from the Lord, the maker of the heavens and the earth. And the Message version says, the maker of heaven and earth and mountains. So God, who made these majestic things called mountains, that's where my help comes from. For the person of faith going up, our help comes from the Lord. And then there's a whole series of promises, right? He will not let your foot slip. He will not go to sleep on you. He who watches over Israel will neither slumber nor sleep. And then there's this promise. He will watch over you. He's the shade at your right hand. The sun won't harm you. The moon won't harm you. He will keep you from all harm. And therein lies the pickle. Because people of faith go through all kinds of things. I think of the small congregation that I pastor. We're about 50, 60 people if everybody shows up, which never happens. About 50 or 60 people. And over the years of my ministry here, all kinds of harm have touched the life of the people here. Divorce has touched our family. Cancer has touched our family. Death has touched our family because of cancer. We've had other tragedies and things that have affected people of faith at this place, and I'm sure at your place too. Christians go through, we lose our job. I think of someone that is a dear friend who lost their job because they were downsized. The company downsized, and they were out. My own mother, when she was working for a firm back in the day, she had been working a faithful employee for many, many years, and they told her on Monday that her last day would be Friday, simply because of corporate restructuring. So Christians, we go through many different things. So what does it mean that he will that the Lord will keep you from all harm? How can that be? How can that be? That doesn't it sound like, that we're supposed to get out of certain things like this, that we're going to be kept from certain trials like that? And of course, life and Scripture do not lie. Christians die because of persecution. Christians die because of economic loss and the causes, or Christians suffer because of economic loss and downgrades in the economy, and on it goes. In fact, really the truth is, all the ills common to people affect Christians too. So the question could be, well, what good is it then? And here's the thing, especially for a younger generation, Jesus is not a good luck charm. He's not a lucky rabbit's foot. I think when I was in my middle school years, I read Bram Stoker's Dracula. And that book, it scared that, what I'm saying, out of me. And it got so intense that I pulled out a crucifix that had been given to me, a cross rather that had been given to me, and I got to wear it at night as I read Bram Stoker's tale of the Prince of Darkness, the vampire, and Count Dracula. And we wore it to ward away the devils, right? But Jesus is not a good luck charm. He says, follow me, if you're going to follow me, you have to pick up your cross and follow him. And as we know, we have gone through, we go through many different things, heartbreaking things that sometimes are just not our fault, or just because we live in a world that is messed up. Again, in Eugene Peterson's book, A Long Obedience in the Same Direction, this is what he says. The promise of the psalm is not that we shall never stub our toes, but that no injury, no illness, no accident, no distress will have evil power over us. That is, will be able to separate us from God's purposes in us. So what he's saying is, we go through trouble, but in the midst of trouble, he is with us, and that is the difference maker. That makes all the difference. So our help comes from the Lord, who keeps watch over our way. And though we go through many difficult and trying things, he is with us always. I just finished rereading Steve Saint's book, End of the Spear. If you know anything about Christian history, you know that in the 1950s, 5 guys from the U.S. moved them and their families to the jungles of Ecuador in the Amazon rainforest with one purpose in mind, and that was to reach what were then referred to as the Auca Indians. They're actually the Waodani. So they moved their families there, and in January 1956 made contact with the Waodani people. This was a Stone Age tribe that was in generation after generation was in a cycle of vendetta and revenge killings, spearing each other, almost to extinction. These men went there to share the gospel with them. Their ministry to the Wadani lasted about 3 days. They made contact with 3 of them first, and then things went awry, and on the 3rd day, they were speared to death on the banks of a river. But that wasn't the end of the story, because some of the widows, among them Rachel Saint, Steve's aunt and sister of Nate Saint, was one of the 5 guys that was speared. Rachel and Steve himself and Elizabeth Elliott, widow of Jim Elliott, and their daughter Valerie lived with the Wadani people for a while. And through that contact, in fact, Rachel stayed the rest of her life there among the Wadani. Many of those people came to know Jesus as Savior. In fact, the 5 that had done the ones who had done the spearing, all of them became Christians. All of them in time became leaders in the Wadani church. So what seemed like a great tragedy and a great loss turned into great gain. End of the Spear is Steve's recounting of the tale. So if you read Through Gates of Splendor by Elizabeth Elliott, that's her version of the tale. This is his version of how the very man who had speared his father to death, Minkayani, became his surrogate dad and a beloved grandfather to his own children. It's an amazing story. They turned it into a movie. The movie, as all movies do, take liberty with the story, and they either they dramatize moments that probably happened over time, but it's still a good movie to see. But I want to read a couple paragraphs from the closing chapter of End of the Spear, because it tells the tale of Steve now, his father, and his children. His sons are married, and they somehow got Minkayani up from Ecuador to be with them for a while in their home in Florida. And their youngest daughter, Stephanie, had been gone on a missions journey for about a year, and Minkayani was there and to welcome her home. And on the same day that they were having the party, Stephanie began to get a pounding headache and developed and went into a coma, and then later died. Steve is finding himself, how he describes that moment, spiraling downward. This is what he says: as my mind was attempting to process the blur of activity around me, I saw the look of fury leave Minkaye's face. It was replaced by a total contrasting look of peace and confidence. He was focused totally on me now. Babe, that was his name that he gave Steve. He said with a big smile, "Now I see this well. Don't you see Wangangi, the name of God, is doing this himself, taking Star, Stephanie, to live in Oneida, heaven, with him?" He pumped his head up and down to emphasize what he was telling me. Minkaye was making no sense. A loving God would not do this to us. He owed us. When he had asked us to give up our lives and live in the jungle, we did. Now all I was asking was to have Stephanie back. Grandfather told me with one hand, held me with one hand, and started reaching out to members of the emergency room staff who were scurrying past us. Ours was not the only drama unfolding in their little world of unexpected hurts. Minkaye had forgotten that they could not understand him. People, he was saying, don't you see what is happening? Wangangi, loving Nemo, he is taking her to live with him now. Being an old man, I will go live there too, very soon. If you will only walk Wangangi's trail, then you dying, you will come to his place, and Stephanie and I will be there waiting. Happily, we will greet you. As the black cloud of despair shrouded me, I could feel my faith slipping away, but Min Kae was wrapping his arms and his faith around me. How strange the information Aunt Rachel had given him must have sounded so long ago. She told him that if he would give up killing those he hated, as Wangangi wanted him to, Wangangi promised to protect him. Min Kae knew that was nonsense. If he gave up killing, he had every reason to believe he would be speared and die. And still, he had given up his vendettas and hatred based on the information he had received from my family. So think of it. Steve's father, Nate, had gone to eastern Ecuador to reach these Stone Age people and died in the attempt. And yet in the very place that his father was killed, Steve, as a young boy, as a young man, was baptized in the same river that his father had died next to, and nurtured and raised in the faith by the man who had done the spearing. And then years later, when he had a family of his own and his own daughter was dying, he was comforted by the very man who had killed his father all those years ago. That is a story only God can write. And one of the sermons that I think Steve is very well known for is Let God Write Your Story. So in our journey up, we go through many different things. We go through troubles past counting sometimes and seem unfair. But we have the promise here that we are kept, that he is working in and through all the different parts of the story, the parts we get, especially the parts we don't get. Paul said it this way in Romans 8, a very comforting verse for those of us who have gone through trouble. And that is, and we know that in all things, God works for the good of those who love him, who have been called according to his purpose. In all things, in death, in hardship, in disappointment, in job loss, in divorce, in whatever seems to be the end, it's never the end. And that is the good news. Because he watches over you, he watches over me, and he is guiding us there to what we call home. The song that has been playing while I've been speaking, I want to conclude with it. Since this is a series of songs of ascent, I'm trying to find a song every week to go with the psalm, and this one's easy because it's by Brian Dirksen, called Psalm 121, I Lift My Eyes Up. you are in your journey up, I pray the Lord will strengthen you. Our help comes from the Lord, the maker of the heavens and the earth and those majestic mountains. He is your help, and he has promised to be with you. And may the Lord encourage you with that thought today. God bless you, and keep going up.